In the therapy room, when I'm authentic with clients, they know that I don't show up as a very stoic AI robot, very cool, calm, collected, but they know a little bit about me. I'm not only a therapist. I'm a daughter of immigrant parents. I'm a dog mom. I'm a wife, and I'm dedicated to so many things outside of my career, even though my career is so important to me. So when they see me as human, they want to work with humans. And the more I humanize myself, I think they can see that I can humanize their experience too.
This is Heard Business School, where we sit down with private practice owners and industry experts to learn about the business of therapy together. I'm your host, Michael Fulwiler. We live in a time where stereotypes can confine, and so it's essential to reclaim our narratives. Today on Heard Business School, I'm thrilled to welcome Michelle Vo, a dynamic licensed clinical social worker based in the Bay Area, dedicated to dismantling the model minority myth and fostering genuine mental health support. As a first-generation Vietnamese American, Michelle brings a profound and personal perspective to her work. She collaborates with and mentors other therapists and organizations to address cultural nuances and destigmatize mental health challenges, which not only fulfills her passion, but is also a profitable income stream. Michelle's journey includes transitioning from hospital work to creating a thriving private practice, all while maintaining a strong emphasis on self-care, authenticity, and the responsible use of technology. In our conversation, Michelle covers everything from the importance of inclusivity in therapy to financial advice on becoming an S corporation. Here's my conversation with Michelle Vo. Enjoy. Michelle Vo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. Our listeners may recognize you because of your photo on our homepage.
I didn't realize it was going to be on the front page, so.
Yeah, how does it feel to be the face of Heard?
It's a lot of pressure. I'm happy to support Heard, and I also feel like we have a good collaborative relationship, so I'm proud to support Heard too.
Definitely. Well, we're grateful for you. You've been a Heard customer, I think, since 2021, which makes you one of our early adopters. You've been very generous with your time. You've done a lunch and learn with our team. We've spoken before. I know you've done customer interviews as well. So just want to acknowledge that, for your generosity.
Oh yeah, of course.
I'm excited to dive into your background in this conversation as a first generation Vietnamese American. Before we get to that, I'd love to start with why you became a social worker.
It's a loaded question, but I've answered this multiple times before. So I became a social worker because I was interested in working with people. Although I went to a big UC, not social work master's program is not really something they advertise to you. So it was something I stumbled upon. So with the help of other mentors and a lot of networking, I figured out, a graduate program that fit best to my needs. And social work felt like a really expansive opportunity to learn about working within communities, policy, and of course, my main interests, which is clinical work.
And that was at Michigan.
Yes.
Right. So you picked up from California, moved to Michigan. In graduate school, was private practice your goal?
Honestly, I was just trying to survive in the Midwest. I lived in the Bay Area where climate is really predictable. So moving to Ann Arbor, I was just trying to figure out how I can feel like I can fit in with my classmates, keep up with my education, make sure that I got an internship that I could learn a lot from. And it always felt like, oh, I can't believe people do that. My goal is just to get a job afterwards and work within a hospital system so I can support people at different stages of their life, either the medical side or the psychiatry side. So private practice felt like years down the road for me.
And why was that? Was it people that you met who were in private practice were older? Was it just felt like there were a lot of barriers and steps to take to get to private practice?
Yeah, I think that I was just really grounded into what I needed to do first, which was to get really skilled as a therapist, get trained, have exposure. And quite honestly, I think it's also part of my background of having financial stability, being first gen. Obtaining a stable job, a W 2 with benefits is a dream. So being able to just maintain one step at a time kept me focused on the current goal. And I think with more time and practice and exposure, it gave me some more opportunities to figure out, like, is private practice something I could be interested in?
I'm glad you brought that up. I'd love to dig into that. So, as a first generation Vietnamese American, how has that impacted your career as a therapist and also your identity as a therapist and the types of clients that you work with?
I think it's everything. I think as I recall, like applying to graduate school, I talked about who I was and how I present in the world and such. I talk about going to graduate school and how I felt like not many people shared similar life backgrounds. Some of my colleagues have family to support them through school or families that are in the medical field or et cetera. And for me, it was, I moved away from my immigrant parents to obtain my education, and I wanted to serve my community, but that also meant that I didn't have the privilege and support to sometimes take care of myself, especially in the mental health system that is somewhat broken or can take advantage of helping professionals. So my Asian American identity, my first generation background really taught me how to advocate for myself first, advocate for my communities, for therapists to be paid equitably in the field, and how I show up as myself with my clients.
Did you feel pressure as a first gen to, be successful and take advantage of the opportunity that you were given, that your parents sacrificed so much to move to the United States?
I never received pressure from my parents. I think everything I did, they were really proud of me. I did feel that pressure internally, maybe not at that time, I didn't realize, but I really tried to network, learn, seek mentorship, and ask a lot of questions. And I think that is a part of the pressure of as a first gen of like, how can I optimize on this opportunity? And how can I make sure that I set myself up for some level of success?
Can you talk about cultural sensitivity and inclusivity and why that's, important for therapists, especially if they're working with clients who come from diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, cultural sensitivity and inclusion and competency is really, really necessary. And this became even much more necessary in 2020 with the Black Lives Movement and, of course, Asian hate crimes during COVID. And these are all things that I was kind of weary and paid attention to as a new student, but had a hard time breaking barriers to discuss this with my colleagues. It's important because a therapist is not a one size fits all. A therapist has to know their own cultural background, their own privileges, their own biases, so they know how they present to clients. Clients don't only build rapport with the therapist because of what they say or how they make them feel, but it's also how they present. When people check my website, before they even meet me, they write, I want to work with you because you mentioned that you're first gen, or I want to work with you because you mentioned what it's like to be a caregiver or to destigmatize mental health in our communities. And I think that cultural competency and having difficult conversations with clients and letting it be known, hey, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to see you holistically, lets them also not dismiss some of their own, how they present in the world.
You mentioned that when clients reach out to you, like they already have a sense of who you are from your website. They also feel like probably that you're speaking to them directly, and that's a result of having a clear niche for your practice. A lot of therapists struggle with defining their niche, especially in the beginning. Therapists are taught you need a niche, you need to focus but it can be hard to define what that niche is. Can you talk about how you defined your niche for your practice?
I think that niche piece is a lot of pressure. It's a ton of pressure. I remember as an intern, I asked, like, what does this mean? It's like your specialization. Like, how are you supposed to know? And how are you supposed to know if you don't try? So for me, my first internship ever was working with postpartum moms. And mind you, I was like 21. I was like, moms, working with moms, postpartum? I don't know anything about parenting. But my mentor, my supervisor at that time, her name was Kate Bullard, and she mentioned, I think you could be good at this. I was just struck by how much she believed in me or how she saw I could be a good fit. So trusting the process helped me find my niche, giving myself opportunities to learn what I liked, but also what I did not love doing too. And where I felt like that passion came from was being able to just dive in and lean into uncomfortable opportunities where I might have dismissed myself before. So not only trusting the process is one of it, but I think the inner self work, learning about why you went to the field, what do you want to bring to your community or where you come from. I think all therapists go into the mental health profession to do their own lived experiences, and they get inspired somehow. They saw there was a need in the world, and I think that inner self work or that paying attention to that can help people find their niche. With the support and the mentorship, I think it is a lot of trusting the process, giving yourself time, and fine tuning your niche with time is okay. You don't have to be a perfectionist and think about this is exactly what I'm due. I'm going to do this forever. I'm going to specialize in this. It's going to change, and that's okay.
I can see having to decide on a specialization when you're new to the field feeling very strange, right? It's like, well, I'm not an expert on anything because I'm a new therapist. So how can I specialize? And I think the point that you're making of, looking inwards at yourself and your own experiences, like everyone is an expert on their lived experience, right? And that's a great place to start for folks who are trying to figure out what that niche could be for their business. Niching down is one challenge that therapists have. What are some other challenges that either you've experienced or you've seen other therapists experience that are going into private practice?
There's so many challenges I think people experience thinking about private practice. And I first think about like self-doubt or judgment. And some of the comments I may have heard passively was, you're really green. I was like, what does green even mean? I was like, oh, it means I'm new. I see. Okay.
I'm actually not green, but yeah.
No, I started private practice the moment I got licensed. After I got licensed, I said, I got to figure something else out for myself. So technically I was a green new therapist. So hearing some other things like, I didn't start until I was X amount of years in, or, so that must be nice, luxury, working with low risk clients, making more money. Okay. So you just got to get a sense of therapists, at least the field of what we should be doing to help our communities. And I also recall when I mentioned to someone I met randomly, oh, I'm a therapist. And they mentioned, oh, what a thankless job. I was like, yes. And should it stay a thankless job? And I was really critical about all of this because I was wondering, like, am I a bad social worker for wanting to take care of myself? Am I a bad social worker if I want to be paid X amount of money, take X amount of vacation or take care of myself so I can show up as best as I can for my patients or clients? So that definitely creeps into my head at times. That barrier that I face, I really had to just counter it with my own North Star. Like, why am I here? Why does taking care of myself matter? And why does it not feel good to not take care of myself and show up, like a zombie with clients at times because I'm so burnt out? So just being able to do the inner self work to know how I matter to my clients what kind of work I would be proud of allowed me to take these small calculated risks to start private practice. But that also comes with, fear of failure, imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of therapists can also run into. What if I fall flat on my face? What if I fail my clients? What if I am too green? What if no one comes knocking on my door? No one messages me? How embarrassing. And I think about, well, okay, at least I tried. At least I tried to put myself out there. I put it my best effort. I did my research. I showed up authentic, and I tried the best I could. I think that matters. When I started this, I was not ever like totally confident that's going to work out, but I had really great friends and colleagues that just reminded me, live in the moment, take real time of your clients' feedback and all the sessions that were successful, the light bulb moments, recall the graduations you assisted with, and take it from there. Take that as data rather than the anxiety brain or the anxiety emotion talking and kind of that holding you back too.
There's this narrative in therapy that therapists are told in graduate school that, you didn't get in this field to make money, you're in this field to help people. And I think it's so interesting that within social work, it's almost more explicit, right? My sense is social work, it's even in the code of ethics as a social worker, right? Versus like maybe being a psychologist or a mental health counselor. It seems it's almost like a different standard. Would you agree with that observation?
I can't speak to different ethics of different programs and credentials, but I do remember going to orientation and there was just jokes like, we're going to be in debt forever. And I'm like, that's not cool. Like, I don't want that. I care about, financial security, and I actually need to take care of myself because I have other people and family to take care of too. And I was a very big advocate on let's not take jobs that are underpaying us, and let's kind of show the world, the field, that we deserve more. And I do agree that, in social work, it is one of the oldest professions out there. And I want to empower social workers that we can be good social workers in many diverse job opportunities and diversify our income that way. Quite honestly, being able to be in private practice has given me opportunities to network and support leaders and to do pro bono presentations and to talk at hospitals and also just to volunteer. I'm not as burnt out. I show up, I'm happy to show up, and I don't feel this kind of stigma that you're bad for taking care of yourself.
You mentioned that you went into private practice as soon as you got licensed. Can you talk about what that process was like for you? Did you go into private practice full time right away, or did you ease into it?
I definitely eased into it. I knew I wanted to just give myself a shot after I got licensed because licensure is like a really big thing. You train for 3 years or so, take 2 big exams totaling to 6 hours each. And mind you, I took the test with a mask on for 4 hours during COVID. I didn't even know what was going to happen, but I'm glad I passed. I'm proud of any therapist that passed, and being able to be licensed and have the autonomy to work for yourself and to practice in ways that you want is really an amazing opportunity. And I just wanted to try it. It was a slow process, not slow in the way that I optimized for Squarespace's 2-week trial to build my website, but it gave me an opportunity like, hey, let's just do it. It's free. I don't have to put any money down. But it took about like a year and a half. I eventually quit my full-time job at a large hospital, moved into a 32-hour position, less than one workday, and started to work on my private practice in the evenings. So I basically kind of worked 2 jobs, and slowly I built my caseload to 6 clients, to 10 clients, to 12 clients, to 15. Then more people wanted to work with me. I started to develop a small wait list, and life happened. I kept getting blackouts in my home. I think there was a lot of power outages, and I was considering, hey, like I might need to rent something just to work out of. I found something 10 minutes away. I signed it and I said, I guess I'm leaving. I need to build a wait list. And that was the birth of working solo. It just happened. And I feel very lucky. I feel very privileged to have these opportunities. And I also know it didn't come easy. It was leaning into the anxiety, trusting myself, and being open to learning as I go rather than this perfectionistic view that once I leave, I should have a full rate pay private practice. I'm not sure if that's realistic for a lot of people.
You've talked about how you had this document and at the top it said, don't quit your day job. And you had just a list of things to do to set up your business. And I love that, how intentional and thoughtful you were about the process. It sounds like you built your caseload over time to the point where you had a wait list. Looking back, what do you think were some of the keys to success for you for getting clients? And what advice would you have for newer therapists who are building a referral network and trying to get their practice off the ground?
I think that building the waitlist took some courage, which was, I'm going to start, everybody. Please let your friends in your community know that I'm taking clients. I'm going to open my schedule to meet and help more people. And I think you don't have to showcase or do a grand opening that everything is set and you're ready. I think you can show people your journey as you grow your practice too. And this means sharing your practice, your niche, your passion with your friends, your acquaintances, with your ex-colleagues, with your current team, if you have that relationship. So that in combination of marketing. So I have a tiny following on Instagram. It's like 1,000 people, but I just tried to stick with that. And actually I was able to find some people who were interested in working with me, but not even in California. So, but through these conversations, I was able to kind of refer them to other therapists I found that could be a good fit. Me as a therapist, not only for building my caseload, but to make mental health less scary and to connect people with the right therapist or the right specialization for them. And I think if you're genuine about mental health services and what mental health can look like, I think people can tell and they want to work with you.
So you started a wait list before you started seeing clients?
Yeah, like 6 weeks out.
I love that idea. So typically when we think about a wait list, we think about when a practice is full, right? So they're no longer able to take new clients. So then you get on a wait list. This idea of, I'm starting my practice in 6 weeks from now, you can join my wait list. And then when you actually open and launch, you have clients who are ready, right? Who've signed up in advance. So I think that that's really smart.
Well, actually, they put a card down and I already scheduled them 6 weeks out. And it was because of a consultation. I talked to them. I said, hey, you have mild symptoms. I don't think it's clinically necessary to see you immediately, or then I would refer you because I'm not available, but I'll be starting in X amount of weeks. Would you be okay with us keeping in contact, keeping your card on file and me securing this? I'll send you all the paperwork and I'll see you. I left my practice, my full-time job on a Friday. I started with a full caseload the week after. It was jumping right in that sense, but at the same time, it was really helpful to know that, hey, it is working. My calendar seems to be full, or it seems to the wait list that people actually do want to give me a shot.
I think just a great example of being creative and innovative in how you think about marketing as a therapist. Starting a wait list before you launch is pretty typical in tech, right? Like, oh, you join a wait list for this new product or this new feature. And then once it comes out, like you're first on the list. So I think that's really great. I'm curious what mistakes you made looking back. It seems like you were very intentional about how you set up your business. Were there anything when you look back that maybe you would have done differently or you wish you had known?
I have two things that popped up in my mind for mistakes. Well, the first one was I was really focused on scheduling clients and building a full caseload, wherever that meant to me. But I wasn't really intentional about how many vacation days do I need to take? What plans do I have? Do I have big events coming up I need to travel for? So being able to plan in advance the days that you may need to take off or might want to take off, and then working backwards on how to keep your schedule consistent within the month so your payroll and your owner's draw look somewhat consistent throughout the year. So that was a mistake. Definitely learned from it, and learning to see clients more flexible times or days to make up for time to be away from the office. The second mistake I would say is CEUs. So when you're not in an organization, you're not going to be reminded to take your CEUs, or CEUs are not going to be openly kind of offered to you. So there's like about 36 hours, at least as a social worker, I need to obtain every 2 years. And it doesn't sound like much, but it sounds like a lot if you neglected it for a year. So I have some new goals on, continuing my continuing education, 12 to 14 CEUs a year, so I can stay on track, and keeping like an Excel sheet of all of that too.
Planning for time off and vacation is a big adjustment for anyone who goes into self-employment, right? Because when you have a W-2 job, you get PTO and you can just take time off and you still get paid. But when you're self-employed, unless you're putting money aside for vacation or giving yourself your own, PTO, you're not going to get paid for that time off. You mentioned owner's draw and payroll. So it sounds like you're set up as an S corporation. How did you figure out that whole process of paying yourself and how much to pay yourself, and as it relates to budgeting for time off and vacation?
I chose to be an S Corp actually because I think I spoke to an accountant. They said, well, it's not going to be profitable unless you make X amount of money. And in my head, that was condescending, and I took it personally, and I was like, watch me. So I signed up as an S Corp. I'm stubborn in that way, but I'm glad I did it. Being an S Corp allows me to pay into taxes on a federal and state level, making me feel secure. If I needed to take time off for short-term disability, if I were ever to plan to have a family, that makes me feel like I'm contributing to my future, but also taking care of myself with the current tax system as an S Corp. How to pay for myself in my salary range changed as I worked, 10 to 12 hours up to 20 hours up to full time. And that was through research and, of course, talking to my accountants at Heard, asking, hey, is this appropriate? Does this look fishy? Should I change this? And it just changed with time. And the more that you work, there's a better average on how much your business makes and what is appropriate to take out as an employee too, and how much money you should technically be keeping for the business for business purposes.
That's really helpful. I know that I've observed a lot of conversations happening in therapist Facebook groups, and I've read threads on Reddit about S Corp, and if you're a therapist, you should be an S Corp. And I just think it's helpful for people to understand what exactly that means. And also, to your point, what that accountant told you, I mean, in some ways is true, right? Like it does benefit higher earners, but it shouldn't be communicated in a way of like, oh, you'll never make that much, so you shouldn't be an S Corp, right? Because that's coming across in a way that feels judgmental.
Because I was greener, I probably took it defensively, like, oh, well, I'm working part-time. But he didn't ask me about my long-term goals. And I think coming from the question of what are your long-term goals for your business is helpful, because there is a lot of, barriers and a lot of trouble from moving from a sole proprietorship to an S Corp as well. And for me, it's like, hey, maybe I want to hire someone. Maybe I'll take on some interns. Maybe I do want to go full-time and make X amount. So maybe it's also okay for me to try and see what that would be like.
Definitely. I want to come back to the idea of authenticity. So this is something we've talked about. I think the way that you show up on your website is appealing to clients, and you're not afraid to talk about yourself and share your story. How does that translate to the therapy room and the way that you build rapport with clients during sessions?
I think you can tell when you meet someone if they show up as present, as genuine, and In the therapy room, when I'm authentic with clients, they know that I don't show up as a very stoic AI robot, very cool, calm, collected, but they know a little bit about me. I'm not only a therapist, I'm a daughter of immigrant parents, I'm a dog mom, I'm a wife, and I'm dedicated to so many things outside of my career, even though my career is so important to me. So when they see me as human, they want to work with humans. And the more I humanize myself, I think they can see that I can humanize their experience too. Because I share about my Asian American background, how Asian American experiences have a lot of dismissive, emotional conversations, I think it helps client learn about, how they can have this feeling of I love and I respect my parents at the same time. I don't really feel like they cared for me emotionally, even though they cared for me by, putting a roof over my head, feeding me, and how to let these things coexist. As an Asian American therapist, I talk about that because I get it. And I feel like they are able to understand that I'm very welcoming of these conversations and there's no judgment. I'm not going to pressure things like, no contact with your parents. They're so toxic. Like, do your own thing. In Asian cultures, filial piety is really important, figuring out loyal to your family. How can you give back to your elders? So, how can that piece of cultural competency come into the room is being authentic to myself, my identity, things I don't want to do, things I feel obligated to do, but how to balance what I want to choose to do and also how I need to take care of myself too.
My friend Patrick Casale of All Things Private Practice, he has this great quote. He says, relatability is accessibility, right? And so I think it makes you more accessible as a therapist when you're relatable for folks who are, looking for someone who can help them. And I imagine that doesn't just show up in the therapy room. It also shows up on the consultation call, if that's something that you offer. And I know a lot of therapists that I talk to struggle with the idea of offering a consultation call because it feels kind of like sales and they don't like the idea of having to sell themselves. So I'm curious, how do you think about that as a therapist, but also a business owner, this idea of sales and like how you navigate those types of conversations?
I think it's really about a consultation fit and if that fit for your therapy practice over than sales. So I'll go in being excited to meet someone, really grateful that they even just want to have a vulnerable conversation with me. And if I feel like I am a good fit for them, I'll let them know. If I feel like their acuity is higher or they need more specialty care, I'll let them know. I try to go in with my background in consultant in a medical hospital of, hey, I'm here to educate you. I'm going to send you to the right resources if we're not a good fit. If you're a good fit for me and you want to work with me, I'll let you know my availability. And I think that just really takes off the pressure for the client. It takes pressure off of me and to focus on the goal, which is, hey, I have time. If I can't serve you here, let me connect you to the right person and help you know that therapy doesn't have to be scary or stoic, that it can be warm and curious. And even though it might not work with you, I still care about you. I want you to go to the right place.
I love that perspective. You talked about CEs earlier in this conversation as something that you, looking back, wish you would have stayed more on top of and not put them off, which is a very common experience. How do you think about professional development and seeking out training and, certifications and things like that?
I go back to my previous comment about like trusting the process, that I come from CBT, DBT, evidence-based solutions-focused treatment, and that was because I was trained in the hospital system. But with time, as I work more with clients in my own kind of business model, it has allowed me to be more open-minded to more opportunities like internal family system, narrative therapy, to explore more about trauma-focused treatment, like accelerated resolution therapy. It makes me curious. So you learn as you go what shortcomings you may have, and you might learn that from consultations. And giving yourself an opportunity to do one or two, brief trainings first and see if it's a good fit to then invest in a certification. I think that it takes time to know what your therapy practice kind of personality is, like what kind of treatment. But for me, it's being eclectic. So balancing all of the therapy modalities I do know, letting them know some things I don't know. And most importantly, knowing that connection is most important with clients' progress in treatment, knowing that they can trust their therapist, that they confide in their therapist, and that any type of suggestions is really dependent on their own kind of life circumstance too, if they're doing their homework.
You've talked about this idea of the model minority myth. Can you explain what that means? And also model mindfulness, which is your handle on Instagram, and how that relates back to that.
Yeah. So the model minority myth is a terminology rooted in anti-Blackness and white supremacy. The stereotype generalizes Asian Americans to be model Americans, highly educated, successful, contributing members of society, versus Black Americans are the problem minority. So this is all increasing levels of oppression and disparities between communities of color. And model minority myth is damaging because it not only contributes to disparities of communities of color, but it dismisses the Asian American experience. And mind you, Asia is a very large place and there's a lot of different cultures and backgrounds. So seeing Asian Americans as a monolith is really dangerous because it decreases things like funding towards government programs and appropriate education on Asian American mental health. And it also dismisses Asian American experiences on an individual level. All of my other Asian friends seem to be doing okay. No one else talks about mental health. Maybe it's just me. So it is dangerous because we don't talk about how a lot of positive stereotypes can lead to very severe depression, anxiety, that Asian Americans are one of the least likely ethnicities to actually receive treatment. And when they receive treatment, it's at a really high level of acuity because it's been bubbling up for some time. So model minority is something that I always talk about with my clients and how we can disrupt these patterns and normalize their struggles in a more cultural, societal lens, and how white supremacy can lead to some stuff like this. And model mindfulness was, for me, I decided, what should I name my Instagram handle? Maybe I'll post some stuff. I wanted to just model something else outside of modeling minority. I wanted to model mindfulness of myself, my community, and I wanted to have these discussions about internalized racism in our communities and also how society might dismiss the Asian American mental health experience. Mindfulness for me means to be very present, non-judgmental of myself, to engage in really in-depth conversations about race and culture and our Asian American experience.
Is this something that you help other therapists and organizations with as well through your consulting work?
Yeah, I mean, I work with my old hospitals. So I've spoken to some doctorates to talk about Asian American experience. I've given presentation at smaller companies to talk about mental health and to really just make mental health education really digestible and relatable. When people understand that mental health is not only diagnostic and clinical, that mental health is just like our physical health. We want to be healthy, we need to do things to be healthy, and we also need to know signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression, just like we know signs and symptoms of having a cough or a cold. So being able to just make all of this less stigmatizing and less scary is a part of model mindfulness, and I can tweak that to serving clients of color, serving clients that identify as Asian American or high achieving professionals, or my other work, which is working with perinatal and postpartum mothers.
How do you manage your own self-care and burnout as a therapist?
I would say that Working in private practice I've taken like 2 sick days. While working at the hospital, I was much more sick, not because I was tired or burnt out, but I think it's just the type of the go, go, go attitude there, not being able to intellectually kind of slow down at these system levels contributed to burnout. But now self-care is working in private practice. It's the lunch that I get to take. It's the consultations with colleagues that I enjoy working with that get me and get my practice, and how we can support each other through difficult case scenarios. Self-care looks like being able to work with the people I enjoy working with and working at the pace I enjoy working with. Self-care looks like exercise and scheduling time off and being able to work a half day some days and being really kind of keeping that consistent. Self-care doesn't have to look extravagant. Self-care is something that has to be consistent, and it really helps regulate not only your emotions, but how you show up in your relationships.
What are some challenges you're facing today as you're thinking about building your practice now that you're more established?
I think some challenges I am being really cautious and considerate of is the mental health industry as a whole, and how tech is really taking the opportunity to build helpful apps and resources for clients. But because the pandemic made mental health services really accessible through telehealth and video platforming, this also means that more therapists are contracted to work as 1099 employees. And knowing about contracts like through Uber and Lyft, that sometimes you don't get benefits that you feel like you deserve, or contracts can change at any time, which then disrupts our business model or what we're anticipating for our business throughout the year. I'm constantly kind of evaluating my contracts as companies grow and expand, learning about how coaches are very accessible and very helpful, but what does it mean for us therapists to either unionize or advocate for our field, our licensure, how to kind of combat that with, of course, capitalism. That's a really big task for me to just consider and think about, but have these discussions with my colleagues is really important. These challenges, of course, they make me worried and scared about the future, but trying to learn how to diversify income, but also keep an open mind. Private practice works for me now, and maybe I get too lonely. Maybe I want to work on a team. Maybe I want to work for a group practice. I want to support other people in a different way, and that's okay too. So trying to keep an open mind, but also going through the motions as things kind of unravel on their own.
I really appreciate that perspective. How have you personally integrated technology into your practice? Used Herd, I know. How do you think about how you use software and technology as a therapist?
Yeah, I think it helps therapists. I think that I find tech to be really cool and exciting because I live in the Silicon Valley, but I want tech to be used for good. And unfortunately, sometimes when things grow very fast, things can pop. So being careful about how many eggs I put in whatever basket, but always evaluating, like how I evaluated my previous employers of the type of work I am able to provide. And I'm excited to be working with a small nonprofit organization that makes mental health journaling and learning about psychoeducation really accessible for people. So been able to kind of work with them to build a really aesthetically appealing app that helps individuals label their emotions and recognize, what triggered this and what can I do about this, to teach them, like in Inside Out 2, that all emotions are necessary and important and that we can learn from them. So I think tech is really amazing. It's just really thinking about, can therapists be a part of the tech too, especially if it's a mental health platform?
We're getting to the end of our conversation. We have a final segment called Footnote. What is one thing that you want therapists to take away from this conversation today?
I would want them to know that wondering if private practice is a good fit for them is conviction enough for them to try. And I know that might sound scary, But small steps is really what it takes. Just like we tell our clients that we're watering our seeds that we're planting and it takes time. I think taking small steps towards your own autonomy and building a practice you're proud of and that you can show up authentically is not only sustainable for your career and your mental health, but people would really benefit from that. As a therapist, you matter. Your self-care matters. The work you do and the communities you serve matter. And I think you should give it a shot.
Well said. Michelle, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you. Where can folks who are listening connect with you if they're interested in learning more about the services that you provide?
Yeah, they can connect with me through my website, which is michellevo.lcsw.com, or send me an email at contact@michellevo.lcsw.com. I work in the state of California and provide services to clients in the state of California, but more than happy to work with not only companies, but other organizations and colleagues throughout the United States. So I hope that this strikes a chord with your therapist, and I wish you all well.
Thank you. We'll put those links in the show notes. Definitely encourage listeners to reach out to Michelle. Thank you again, Michelle.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Herd Business School, brought to you by Herd, the financial back office for therapists. Visit the Herd Resource Hub at joinherd.com to support you in your journey as a private practice owner. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next class.